An Iranian police officer has been killed in a stabbing during unrest near Tehran as the protests over the cost of living in the country entered the 12th day. Local news agency has said Shaheen Degan, who was a member of the police force, was killed few hours after being stabbed during efforts to control the unrest. In another incident, a high-ranking police officer was shot dead in a city in Sistan and Baluchistan province. This is the same area where statues of the late Supreme Leader Ruhollah Khamenei and his successor Ali Khamenei were set on fire by protesters on Tuesday. Hakikat was a police station commander in that area in Iranshir and former intelligence chief of the city. He was known for crackdowns on anti-regime Baluch activists. New protests have broken out in several parts of Iran. Social media videos showing protesters marching in the port city of Bandar Abbas in southern Iran's Hormozgan province, as protests reached their 11th day on Wednesday. In fact, social media videos also purported to show new cities like Kerman, Shiraz, Tabriz and some smaller towns joining the demonstration. Footage showed people clapping, cheering, chanting on the streets. As sanctions tightened and Iran struggled after the June war with Israel, its real currency sharply fell in December. The protest started soon after on the 28th of December, and even on the 12th day, they don't appear to be stopping, reaching over 310 locations in 28 of Iran's 31 provinces. It is the most serious protest movement in the Islamic Republic since the 2022 to 2023 nationwide rally sparked by the death in custody of Mahsa Amini, who was arrested for allegedly violating the strict dress code for women. Remember, the exiled son of Iran's toppled Shah, meanwhile, has urged Iran's armed and security forces to side with the people and called for more protests amid persisting unrest. Pahlavi has lived in exile for over 4 decades, since his father, the US-backed Shah, was overthrown in the 1979 Islamic Revolution. It remains unclear how much support he has on the ground, but there have been some slogans in his favor in demonstrations.
In these decisive moments, I expect you to return to the embrace of the nation and to use your weapons not to fire at people, but to protect them.
In fact, the US-based human rights activist news agency offered the latest death toll of 36 from the demonstrations. It said 30 protesters, 4 children, 2 members of Iran's security forces have been killed. More than 2,100 people have been arrested. In recent days, US President Donald Trump has threatened to intervene in Iran if demonstrators were killed, while Israel's Prime Minister has expressed support for the demonstrations. Responding to the statements, the commander of the Iranian army has warned that Tehran would not tolerate outside threats without responding. He said that if those he referred to as enemies make a mistake, Iran's response would be more robust than during last year's 12-day war with Israel. Let's go straight across now for more perspectives to our esteemed guests. Let's just first talk, David, about the very fact that what we are witnessing on the ground in Iran is unprecedented and a major challenge to the regime there. At the same time, we are looking at the protests spreading across the country, more and more paths joining in. What do you make first of the situation on the ground right now, and where do you see this heading?
Look, that's a very good question. When you're assessing events in Iran, and I think any revolution or possible revolution, you have to ask 3 questions. Who is taking part? Where are the protests? How far have they spread? There's one. Who is taking part, and does the regime remain united? Now, in previous protests, they've looked great on TV around the world, but they've been located, to Tehran or other major cities, and generally, in terms of question number 2, they've been staffed or the people taking part have been middle-class, educated protesters. The regime as well has remained united and clamped down. Now, what's different this time? It does seem as if protests are now spreading to rural areas, or beyond at least the major cities. I saw, for example, a lot of protests in Mashhad, which is a big city, but it is a conservative and religious city. So it is not what you would think to be the prime locus of anti-regime sentiment. That's very telling. So the first 2 questions is, one, it seems that it's more than just the educated middle classes now. This is not about the veil. This is not about civil rights. This started as an economic protest with the bazaris, the shopkeepers, for years the backbone of the regime, beyond the ideological core. And finally, the third question, does the regime remain united? Thus far, yes, we haven't seen mass defections. But what is different is that this time Donald Trump has come out and said, if you crack down, if you start killing protesters, as the regime has done in the past, we are locked and loaded and ready to go, and we will take you out. And if the regime thinks Donald Trump is bluffing, and he might be, but they should just look at the ruins of their nuclear program. So this is different now. Will it lead to the overthrow of the regime? Let's all calm down. But this is the biggest threat they have faced since the founding of the state in 1979.
You've been analyzing the situation on the ground for so long, so I have to understand from you. First, it takes a lot to actually come out on the streets in Iran and do what these protesters are doing. We've seen those statements coming in from the regime first, promising that there will be dialogue, there will be some sort of outreach, but now we see a sort of a clampdown in a way, that the protesters will not be allowed to go ahead in a manner that they would probably like. What do you make first of the reaction from the regime itself?
Well, as I say, you will expect them to do something. They have to respond. Now, this is a revolutionary regime, don't forget. They've always been kind of cunning and smart. They never did what Hosni Mubarak did. They never did what Assad did in Syria. They avoided the mass deaths, the mass violence. They never put tanks onto the streets, because this is what the Shah did in the 70s, and they learnt from it. But they have to clamp down on this. They have to start getting brutal. And if they do too much, they may have to deal with the Americans. So that's what I'm saying. The regime so far remains united. This is the key. We're not seeing mass defections of the army. We're not seeing mass defections of the police. So as of now, the regime remains precariously in control. But as I say, if they start unleashing their brutality, and the Americans start striking regime installations, regime bases, then they have a major problem. So they're kind of caught. They have to walk this tightrope between trying to be brutal enough to put down the uprising, but at the same time not so brutal that they bring Donald Trump's wrath down on their heads. It's a nearly impossible situation, I'm pleased to say, because it's about time that these guys went. You talk about people now being, they are still coming out onto the streets, and you're absolutely right. As well as the Real crisis, as well as the endless oppression, there is a water crisis in Iran. Even the regime has talked about possibly having to move out of Tehran because of drought. You can terrorize people back into their homes who want the vote, but those who are going to, die of thirst, they have nothing to lose. And increasingly, the Iranian people feel they have nothing to lose and everything to gain by protesting. And we must give them our support.
A quick word before we let you go. Like you said, you commented on Trump's statement. Is he bluffing or not? According to you, do you see him following through in any way on that statement?
Look, as I say, you never know with Donald Trump. He says a lot of things and forgets them. But if the regime thinks he's completely bluffing, they should look at the ruins of their nuclear program that he struck with the Israelis in June. They should ask Mr. Maduro if he's bluffing. Don't forget, Trump is a funny guy. At the end of 2019, he had a Twitter argument with the Ayatollah Khamenei. And Khamenei said, "You can't do anything." A few days later, he killed Qasem Soleimani. Maduro screamed on video, I'm sure you saw this, "Come and get me, you coward." Well, he came and got him. Trump has now said, we're locked and loaded, ready to go. So if the mullahs want to try it, okay. They're braver men than I am.
Leaving it there for the moment. Appreciate you joining us here.
Thank you.
To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.